Hey, 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 today is National Relaxation Day. Yes, National Relaxation Day here in the United States. And I don't know, last week was National Lazy Day or Laziness Day. So, what is it? So, are we exhausted from National Lazy Day last week? So, today has to be National Relaxation Day? I don't know. I don't know who makes up these crazy national days out there in the Twitterverse, but it's pretty bizarre. But I can tell you one thing that won't be too bizarre, and that is the Daily Dope being in the air. Howdy, 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 gang. Yes, I'm Jeff McLear, back once again as your host here at The Daily Dope, presented by thegaminggang.com, of which I happen to be the Grand Poobah. So, welcome aboard. Today is Wednesday, August 15th. It's Wednesday, so you know that means we're talking Wargames today. And I am actually devoting the vast majority of today's show to my review of Hitler's Reich from my good friends over at GMT Games. Yes, doing something a little bit different today. Normally, I start off with doing news of the day, and then maybe I'll, do something from the mailbag, or I'll jump into an unboxing or review. Well, today, first of all, I still have that weird sinus thing going on, and it is kind of in my lungs now, so it's getting ready to do the bronchitis thing. But I also was spending some time this morning talking to doctors and setting stuff up because I still got to go have that other stent put into the old ticker. So I was doing a lot of that on the phone today, so didn't really have a lot of time to put together some news. So my apologies on that. I know some people just like when I jump right into things too. So I do know the review of Hitler's Reich is going to take a bit of time. So I'm going to kind of go through how you play the game, talk about things I like about the design, things that could have used a little more work or could have been cooked a little longer, and what I think of it and who I think it will appeal to. So that is coming up in just a few minutes. Do want to point out for the rest of the week what I've got cooking as well as early next week. So on tomorrow's show, it's Thursdays. I like doing RPGs on Thursdays, so we're gonna take a look at Kids on Bikes. This is the deluxe edition. See, this is the hardback, and it is from Hunter's Books, or I should say Hunter's Entertainment, as well as Renegade Games Studio. So we're gonna be taking a peek at this on tomorrow's show. Friday's show, I will be reviewing Tiny Epic Galaxies, and I keep kind of giving it away that I really do like this game. Then on Monday, we're going to take a first look and unbox Master of the Galaxy. Yes, Master of the Galaxy. It is a very quick playing 4X game, science fiction game, and it is from Ares Games. So that'll be on Monday's show. Tuesday's show, we're going to unbox and take a first look at Fist of Dragonstone's Tavern Edition from the fine folks over at Stronghold Games. So we're going to be taking a peek at that. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to take a quick, well, I shouldn't say quick, I'm going to take a first look and unbox Brawling Battleships. It is a World War I naval card game from Lost Battalion Games. And if you follow the Daily Dope, you know I've talked about how I introduced my nephew Cameron, as well as some of his friends, to Fletcher Pratt's naval war game, and they dig it a lot. So I've kind of gotten them a little bit into some naval gaming, and I'm interested to check out Brawling Battleships. So that's what's going on. Let me move some of this stuff back around here. So that's what's cooking. I do want to point out that this is a live stream. I know a vast majority of people watch this after the fact, but if you are watching live, there is chat available. It's on YouTube, and it is not on screen, but if you have a question or a comment, want to say hello, or you have a question about Hitler's Reich as I'm going through the review, by all means, give me a shout. I will see it and I will respond. Like I said, it's not on screen. It's one of the ways that I kind of keep some of the stranger commenters at bay. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be reviewing Hitler's Reich from GMT Games. It is designed by Mark McLaughlin, and I believe it's Fred Schachter. I'm trying to make sure I get the correct pronunciations. Hey, I got Drew Barbier watching live today. Howdy, Drew. Don't worry, Drew, you haven't missed any news. I'm not doing any news today. I'm jumping right into the review. Artwork is by Roger B. McGowan for Hitler's Reich. Roger does a lot of fantastic artwork for GMT Games. The game itself is for 1 to 2 players. There is a variant which can bring it up to 4 players. I will talk about that, although I gotta be honest, I didn't try it. It's for ages 14 and up and plays in about an hour or 2. Hitler's Reich is available right now, and it does carry an MSRP of $69. So let's move on over to the other camera. Do want to point out, as usual, space is at a premium here. So I have some stuff kind of squeezed in a little bit. So the game board, or the game map, if I want to refer to it as that, is not really huge. It's not a massive game. And let me move some of these cards out of the way, kind of take a little tour of the board. And I'm trying not to cut anything off up here. That's why I've got this kind of off to the side a little bit. So first thing I noticed when I took a look at the board itself, I mean, in my opinion, it's a little blah. It doesn't really pop. And it's serviceable. I'm not saying it's bad. It does serve its purpose. But the way I sort of look at Hitler's Reich is this is a pretty abstract game where you're going to pretty much tackle nearly the entirety of World War II. So the game does start in 1941 as the pretty much just as the United States is getting involved in the conflict. So it is fairly abstract. The way I kind of look at it is it's really kind of designed as almost an introductory war game. Or, you know, of course, a lot of like long-time war gamers, they like to be able to maybe play something to completion in a couple of hours themselves. But I would have thought if they were going to, you know, try to introduce new gamers to wargaming, even though this is kind of an abstract war game, they might have gone with a little more pop, a little more visual oomph to the board itself. Like I said, it's not bad, just doesn't knock my socks off. I was a little surprised when I opened this up and I saw that the board looked like this. I'm not necessarily dinging the game for it. As I mentioned, I'm just a little surprised. Okay, so if we take kind of a little tour around the board, and then I'll zoom in a little bit and then zoom back out. So we do have the various different areas of of basically Europe. So we've got England and the UK here. We've got Germany, France. Remember, this starts in 1941, so France and Poland have already fallen. That's why they are marked as Axis territories, Axis areas. We also have some areas with Italy, and of course down here we also have the Allies as well. So you'll have an area control element to this game. The game begins looking like this. So let me zoom in just a little bit, kind of show off here. So as we can see, because these are marked with the German cross, these are areas that the Axis control. So if we take a look here, we see this oil barrel. This means that this is pretty much a resource area here. There's one of the victory conditions is to capture these 6 starting resource areas for your opponent. That is one of the win conditions. It's also a win condition for the Axis as well. If they can hold Berlin, as well as 2 of their original resource centers at the end of the game, at the end of 1945, they actually will win. So we have various different counters. So this blue token here, that simply shows that this is an area controlled by the Allies. A black area, which you would not be putting a black disc on an area already controlled by the Axis because it's already marked as controlled by the Axis. But if I zoom out a little bit, say Yugoslavia, for example, you would mark that to show Axis control. Same thing with the Soviets. Obviously, you're not going to mark something in the Soviet Union that's already a Soviet area, but you would, if they took Poland, mark it with that as well. So these are the area control tokens. Then we also have the fortress tokens, which look like this. That is Allied, that is Axis. And then we also have fleets, which are simply these longer black wooden pieces here. And the Soviets, I shouldn't say Soviets, the Axis have 4 of these, and the Allies have 6 of theirs. There is no red fleets for the Soviet Union. As I mentioned before, this is a pretty abstract game. Let's zoom all the way back out again. So we're going to see some different areas right here on the board. So we're going to show this area here shows how many blitzkriegs are still available to the Axis player. I will talk about the blitzkriegs in just a little bit. Talking about bonus actions. If you have earned a bonus action on your turn, you're simply going to put that boink right there. You're going to put this little yellow marker there and go, okay, so I've earned a bonus action. When you use the bonus action, you're going to just remove it. God, I apologize. I'm going to be a little sniffly and kind of coughing a little bit throughout this video, so I do apologize right up front again. But anyway, I want to point out, while we were playing, we really didn't pay that much attention to this. It's nice to have it here, just in case. But for the most part, we knew when somebody had a bonus action coming and when they didn't. Then here, this is going to mark, is the German-Soviet Pact, the non-aggression pact, still in effect at the beginning of the game. If you're playing the full game, it is. So you will not have the Soviet Union and the Axis fighting it out. We have Italian surrender. So if the Italians ever surrender, you would mark this off. We have an Axis big push available, and then we have the Allied big push available, and I'll explain what the big pushes are. Then over here we've got hand size. And hand size is important because hand size is going to show you how many conflict cards you are going to have in hand. These are conflict cards here. We'll take a peek at those in just a sec. And it also will determine victory. So for an example here, the green marker is for the Allies. The black marker here is for the Axis. So at the beginning of the game, the Allies will have 6 conflict cards in hand. That's their hand size. Whereas the Axis will have a hand size of 8. If at any point you have reduced your opponent to a hand size of 0, you will win. Also, if at any point you raise your hand size to 12 while driving your opponent, their hand size down to 3 or less, you are the victor once again. So we'll put these back where they're supposed to start off with the Axis with 8 and the Allies with 6. Then we have the year track. And here we have the blue Ally, and then we've got the black Axis. Actually, well, no, I guess I'll leave it as green. You'll notice these fortifications that you only will have so many fortifications. So the Axis will have 4 because one of these is being utilized for the hand-sized track and one of these is being utilized for the big push. So these fortification counters or pieces, you can only have 4 fortifications. So you can only have as many things as you have pieces for. You cannot have more than that. You're not going to like take a piece of paper or something like that, scratch paper, and like write something down and go, oh, okay, boom. That's an extra fortification. Nope, you can only have as many as you actually have pieces for. So don't lose any pieces. But anyway, the way this will work is when your conflict card deck gets reshuffled, and when you run out of cards, you are going to move it to the next spot. So for an example here, this is the game start. This is the end of 1941, this box right here. It's going to show, okay, that's the end of 1941. The end of 1941, or any of these timing mechanisms here, will not take place until the other player has also moved down into this area here. So if the allies end up having to reshuffle their conflict cards first, and the Axis have not, then you are still in this turn. You are still in the first game turn. It's only when both sides have reshuffled their conflict cards that you'll move into the next year. Now there is an optional, I've got it floating around over here someplace. There we go. There is an optional 6-month turn track that you can utilize as well if you want to. You don't have to, but if you want to kind of have a longer game, then you can go with the optional 6-month turn track. So put that back over there. I just wanted to mention that for you. The optional 6-month turn track is probably something that you would maybe consider if you're looking at doing a 4-player variant, just to kind of give people, a few more opportunities to be doing things. So that is the board itself. We've got these sea areas here. We've got land areas here. And that is pretty simply it. If somebody controls an area, you're going to mark it with the color of your side. Do want to point out that for an example here, if I had a fleet in the channel, that doesn't mean that I control the channel. I have a fleet there. That means I will have an advantage as far as attacking and defending, but that does not mean I control the channel. I would actually have to be able to have a marker here. So just to point that out. Oh, whoa, almost lost that piece flying off. Okay, so the main gist of this game is the conflict cards, utilizing conflict cards, and utilizing event cards. So the first thing I'm going to take a look at, I'm going to show you, are the conflict cards. And these conflict cards are basically 1 to 13, and they will have a rank on them. They'll show a rank. So 8 is major. We've got a private as a 2. We've got the Supreme Commander. That is a very sweet card. We've got a Red Star Colonel, so that is a Soviet card. We've got a Red Star Saboteur, and we have a Colonel. So not bad for the 6 starting cards for the Allies. And if you're playing the full game, you're going to see that the Germans will have a bit of an advantage in their starting conflict cards, as well as their starting event cards. So what these conflict cards do is anytime you're battling for an area, be it land or sea, or you are trying to acquire an event card, you are going to play a conflict card, either as the active player or the inactive player. So for an example, the Axis go first. The Axis player could say, okay, well, I'm going to try to go after an event card. They would use one of their conflict cards in hand, and the allied player is going to counter with one of their conflict cards. Now, these conflict cards are always kept face down, And when you choose a conflict card and you play it, it is played face down. So you're going to reveal those cards simultaneously when you're having a battle, or if you are looking for trying to receive an event. So some of the conflict cards actually give you a special ability too. So Major's just an 8, Private's just a 2, Supreme Commander is interesting because it'll show you you're able to re-roll up to 3 allied dice once you've played your events. And also show up on the top there, next to the 13, those 3 dice. Now, this also shows a white star. So the white star is going to mean either the British or Americans. So that's what the white star actually will mean. The red star means that is for the Soviets. Now, there isn't much that the Soviets can do until, excuse me, Germany, or the Axis, I should say, decide to put Operation Barbarossa in effect when they decide they are now going to invade the Soviet Union. That actually is going to be in the hands of the Axis player. They don't have to necessarily start off the game by jumping on in to the Soviet Union. They can wait. Realistically, they don't actually ever have to invade the Soviet Union, although, to be honest, you're probably going to want to at some point. So, we've got these different cards. And then we've got the Saboteur. Saboteur is an interesting card because it's a 1. But if you play the Saboteur, it also will make the enemy's card, your opponent's card that they play, a strength of 1. So we've got the Colonel, that's a 9. Once again, it's just that number. And I will show you how we're going to use these various different conflict cards as well during the game. I do want to point out a couple of things before I start jumping into how we play the game. We've got the rules of play, 24 pages. There are a lot of people out there who really, really hate this rule book. I'll be the first one to say I don't love it. This, at its heart, Hitler's Reich is pretty easy to get into. There are a few exceptions. There's Operation Overlord, and there's Operation Barbarossa, and then there's the Soviet operation, which was the big pushback against the Germans. I forget what it's called. So those are 3 big operations that they don't necessarily break the rules of what you've been doing, but they add some complexity. But the thing is, those are just 3 operations that take place. The rest of the game, for the most part, you're going to be doing what I'm going to be showing you. There are a few other things. There are some, especially like some of the sea zones. There's some specific kind of rules that you have to look at for various different sea zones. But for the most part, reading through the rule book makes this game seem to be way more complex than it actually is. And I can see why some folks were like, boy, I don't like this rule book. Especially who is probably picking up the game. I mean, long-time grognards are going to be sitting there and like, okay, I'm used to this. I am used to the case point system. Yeah, 5.5, end of year, 6.0, actions. Other gamers who are hearing about Hitler's Reich being a very accessible kind of abstract game where you can pretty much play World War II in a couple of hours are coming to this game from more of a, traditional American style game, which is usually similar to this, or more likely from a European style game where, for one, they're not used to having 24 pages worth of rules to be looking through and simply not presented as dryly, I guess I would say. But don't believe the hype where this is like the worst rule book ever, anything like that. Is it great? No. Is it serviceable? Yeah. And there are some errors in this too. So I do want to point out your best bet is to go to Board Game Geek. I think it's also on GMT Games. The designers have actually come up with kind of a almost like a quick play explanation, which actually clears up a lot of this stuff and clears up some of the errata that's floating out there. So, like I said, it's not the worst rule book I've ever seen by far. It's not as intuitive as I would have liked either. But, and I was a little disappointed because usually GMT, yes, okay, the rule books, they're pretty cut and dry. It was the playbook that kind of threw me because I'll let you in on a secret. I don't know if I'm the only one out there who does this, but I'm sure a lot of people do this. When I bust out a GMT game, excuse me, gosh, wow, sinuses are really, really starting to bug me here. I read the playbook first. Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to, get a feel for how to play the game. So I'll read the playbook, and then I'll start reading the rule book. I would take a guess I'm probably not the only person who does that. Unfortunately, the playbook didn't necessarily make things as clear as they should be either. I was kind of surprised. First of all, it kind of starts off with the design notes, and the design notes are usually reserved for like the back of the book. Then we start getting into all these optional rules, and it's sort of like, okay. Then it talks about the solitaire bot, which I have not played around with. I have played this as a 2-player game. Then we finally get like an example of play, and the example of play is okay. Not as crystal clear as many other playbooks. So I do have to say that, like I said before, the game is a little harder to get into if you just were to read these, both the rule book and the playbook. Some things are as clear as mud. But thankfully, like I said, I mean, there's some how to play videos out there as well that are going to go into way more detail than I'm going to in my review here. But I was able to crack this game, and I am certainly probably not the brightest bulb on the string either. But I did want to mention that. Now, let me grab a sip here. So I was showing you the conflict cards. Then we've got event cards, and we have allied events, like so. We have Axis events, like so. And then we actually have Allied and Axis events, like so. As I mentioned, because space is at a premium, what you would normally do, and what I would normally recommend, is you would have your game board set up, and then you would actually have your different events that are available for your side kind of laid out by you. And I want to say there's a couple cards in here that aren't available until 1942. But you would kind of set it up like this, so that you know what events are out there that you can possibly get, that you can actually attempt to earn, because you have to earn these events. These events, you're not going through a deck with just, it's not like Twilight Struggle where you're going to have your events and you got your operations points, and okay, so do I use it as an event or an operation point? You have to earn these events. Now, you will have some starting events to begin with, and I will show off, first of all, the different kinds of events. So the first thing you're going to look at here, so we see there's a red star. We've got the rondelle for the UK. We've got the white star for the US. We've got the black cross for the Germans. So that's going to tell us this is an Allied and Axis event. So the event is war production. It's going to increase your card, your hand size by 1. And remember, as I mentioned, you want a lot of cards in your hand, because Having 12 and driving your opponent down to 3 or less wins you the game. But having the 12 cards in hand, and when they're talking about the cards in hand, they're talking about the conflict cards, gives you way more options in your game turn. When you only have 5 cards, you're not going to have as many options. Plus, when you drive, and there are cards that will actually cause a player, your opponent, to lose 1 from their hand size. That means they have to actually discard a card, and then they have a smaller hand size. So looking at the different events, we've got events like here, turncoats. So if we take a look at this box up here, it's got an X. It also shows that this is a Soviet event. So until the Soviet Union is involved in the war, the Allied player's probably not going to try to get this event. But if we see the little box with the X, that means this is a one-time event. So when this event gets played, this takes place. You're going to read the text on the bottom of the card. You're going to put those actions into effect. You're going to, whatever the card tells you to do, you're going to do it. And then the card is removed from the game. And this is actually a 1942 and on card. As I had mentioned, we have cards like that were from, they're not available to buy right off the bat. Or I should say earn. You're not buying them, you're earning them. So once that card that event would fire, then this card is removed from play. Then we have events which you'll see it has this arrow in this kind of box. This is a returnable event. So what this means is you can use this event, and then once you've used the event, it is actually going to go off to the side, and this card will become available once to earn again, not go into your hand, but to earn once again once you have reshuffled your deck. Once you've reshuffled your deck, then you'll be able to put this back out into your available. This happens to be an Allied and Axis event, so it would go back into the various different Allied and Axis events. So usually you're going to take the Allied and Axis events and you're going to kind of like maybe string them along up on top of the board. So these are available as well. They're just for both sides. So we've got that. Then we have, effectively, this is a reusable event. So with this event here, War Production, you could play this event and then it goes back into the possible events that could be purchased. Once again, this is an Axis and Ally event. But you would have the War Production, and then you use it, it goes back, it could be earned again. So to give you kind of an example, I'll show you the last one. Put that up there. This is a win-lose event. So this is General Patton. So this is a win-lose. So if you have this event and you're using this event will stay available to you until you lose when you've used it. And I'll explain how you would win or lose in a conflict with this event card with General Patton. So let's take these. Let's get a better Allied event here. Let's go with Convoy. No, we already got 2 convoys. So let's go with I guess fleet carriers. So there are the way the game will start is the Allies are going to have 3 events, and the Axis will have 4 events that are available to them. And these events will stay in front of the player face up. So your opponent is going to know what possible events you have available to you. There's no surprises with that. The surprises all come from the conflict deck. There are no surprises involved with the events. You can only have 6 events in front of you at one time. If you earn a new event, then, and you already have 6, you are going to need to discard one of those events that you already have. So for an example, something like this, let's say you got a new event, you had the fleet carriers, and you're like, okay, well, this is a win-loss, so I would put this back into my deck of possible events. It would not be tossed out of play, and it would not be moved into a returnable event, because the returnable events are the ones that have, all right, where we go, there we go. That is a returnable event. Usually the returnable events are fairly powerful, just like the one-shots that will be removed from play. The ones with the X in the box are fairly powerful as well. So we're saying that these are the cards that we've got for the allied player, and we've got the Axis player. So the Axis player will have a hand of 8 conflict cards, and they actually get to begin the game. They actually will get a bit of a boost as far as their conflict cards. So they will have some higher conflict cards, higher numbered conflict cards in their hand, whereas the allies is completely random what they will have in their 6 cards. So 4 of the conflict cards to start off with for the Axis are going to be pretty good. They are going to have reroll ability to them. So with the Axis deck, you've got the Germans and you've got the Italians. And interestingly enough, it will show what happens with the Italians. The Italians always lose on ties. So for an example here, Supreme Commander for the Axis, if you played that and it was a tie, you would win that tie. But the Italians on all their cards, in fact, there's a lot of Italian cards here in this. Doesn't matter what their number is, they are going to lose all ties. So we've got the 8 cards for the Axis, and then we've got the Axis events, and I already selected. And once again, there's kind of a starting, not necessarily you automatically start with certain events, but you will have some events you're going to pull out. You're going to randomly deal some of those out. So, for an example, Wolf Packs is one. So we've got Wolf Pack, General Rommel, we got Stukas, and then we got War Production from the Axis and Allies event deck. So these are events that are available to us right off the bat. So what you've got here is, in each turn, you're going to have, and let me grab the player aid here, because it's a pretty good player aid. So it's going to show you the sequence of play. It's going to tell you the actions. It's going to tell you conflict resolution procedure. And it's also going to tell you about your bonus actions. And then we go into a little more depth about basic conflict resolution as well as marker effects. So you know what? I'm going to pop on the old reading specs here. So remember I was talking about a vast majority of your time you're going to be doing a couple of things, and that in the rules it was sort of like there's a lot of focus on sort of the minutia, or like, okay, well, these little things can happen. Yeah, it's great that that's being covered, but the real meat of the game is one of 2 things going on. First of all, trying to earn an event card or attacking someplace. That is really the main gist of what's going to happen 85% of the time. So I will talk about those in just a sec. So we do have the ability to, these are your actions. You can reorganize, which you can only do once a year. So for an example, you might, if you're the allied player and you got a bunch of red star cards, you may consider doing a reorganize, because the thing is, if those red cards really don't help you out. So it says, if available, allies must play a red star card when attacking, defending from a Soviet area. You can use these cards, but you're probably going to want to have more of the allied cards. Until, of course, Operation Barbarossa gets launched. So what you do here is you have an option. You can either discard a minimum of 2 or all your cards to redraw. And then this is actually going to speed up the process of the year coming to, that year coming to an end. But what you're looking at is you're going to be able to, so if you get a really terrible hand of cards, like if you're looking at, 4s and 5s and 3s, you're probably going to want to also do the reorganization. So what you can do is you can either do from 2 to all your cards and actually lower your hand size by 1, or you can discard at least 1 or all, so you're not saving any of them, and you can actually have your opponent increase their hand size. Once again, this is something you can only do once per year, and you're only going to do it if you're stuck with a really terrible hand of cards. Then we got Fortify. Simply enough, all you're going to do is you fortify an area on the board that you possess, making it more difficult for your opponent to conquer that area, that territory. That's simple enough. Then we've got reinforcements. So you can reinforce. Reinforcements is basically putting a ship, I should say it's a fleet, it's not a ship, putting a fleet in an ocean area. Once again, keeping in mind that this does not give you control of that sea area, that the sea area can only be controlled by an actual conflict taking place in that sea area. Reason why you would reinforce and have fleets in certain areas is because it also gives you the opportunity for amphibious assaults. So that's pretty cool too. The other thing for reinforcement is you can try to acquire a big push. So a big push, essentially, each turn you can attack. So you can you can attack or you can play an event. Those give you a bonus action. If you fail, so say you decide, okay, I'm gonna attack as my first action, hoping to be successful and have a bonus action after that. If you were to fail, that'd be it. That'd be the end of your turn. If you have a big push available, the big push will allow you to attack twice. Even if you fail on the first attack, you can still attack a second time. Also means that you can follow up on that. Now, the Germans have the ability to do a blitzkrieg. So that's what these 3 little cubes here are. They can blitzkrieg up to 3 times. And it's actually kind of cool because you can really kind of push your luck as far as attacking from one place into another place into another place. The only thing is, as opposed to a big push, if the Axis use blitzkrieg, every time they want to do it again, so let's say, okay, so I succeeded my one attack, I want to do a blitzkrieg, so you're going to remove one of the cubes, but you're also going to drop your hand size by 1. So the hand size is kind of like your production, kind of your war production. It's one way to kind of look at that hand size. So you don't want to do a whole lot of blitzkriegs because remember, that hand size is super important. So that is the reinforced. Then we've got the event action, which I'll talk about in a sec. The attack action, show that in a second. The big push, I've already explained what the big push is. And then you can also conduct operations, which would be Operation Overlord, Operation Barbarossa, and Operation, I can't remember the name of the Soviet offensive to push back the Germans. So, and as I mentioned The operations are a little more complex. They're not super complex, but they do kind of break what's normally going on. So, as an example, let's say the Axis player, which the Axis player is going to be going first. They always go first. Okay, so we've got. This is just an example of some of the event cards. Like I said, what you want to do is you want to have an area off to the side where you're going to have all your event cards out. So the first thing you're looking at is you have the option. Let's say the German player says, "Okay, so I want to get an event, and I want to get Franco. I want to get Spain joins the Axis." Now, there are a lot of events. There are not tons of events. And that might actually deter some people because there's enough events and enough, like, for an example, like synthetic fuel, right? Synthetic fuel, I don't know. Do you want to call that an event, or is that some like a production sort of thing? Of course, it's a production sort of thing, but it's considered an event in this game. So you got to mix it like V-Rockets, right? V-Rockets aren't necessarily an event. So, say for an example, okay, so I'm the Axis player, and I want Spain to join the Axis. And doing that would mean I get to place a control marker in Spain, and it would increase my hand size. So what you do is now you're going to say, okay, so do I have any events in here that I can use during the event phase? Well, no doubt, no. You won't. So you'll say, okay. I mean, there are some, but these starting cards won't. So you say, okay, so it's going to come down to my conflict card. So as I mentioned, the Germans they've got 8 cards, and this is actually a really, really good hand. So the Axis player says, well, I really want to get that Spain joins the Axis, but I don't want to blow a 13 on it. Let's go with an 11, which would allow me to re-roll 1 die. So I put that down there. So the Allied player's sitting there saying, hey, man, I don't know. I don't really want that. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to spend my Supreme Commander card on it. But I want to use something to try to prevent that. So I'm going to play this 9. So they would flip like so. So you've got dice. You're going to be rolling dice. So you normally will roll 3 dice. That is standard. You roll 3 dice. Now, you will have different events, things like that are going to give you more dice, going to allow you to re-roll dice. As an example, I was talking about the fortifications. The fortifications give you an additional die when you're defending. It's buffering a whole lot. Is that on your side or mine? Let's see. It is... Well, let me take a look here. I am not showing any drop frames, so that would usually mean Drew was asking, just I saw something pop up in chat. I know I've been kind of carrying on for a few minutes here, asking about the video buffering a lot. But I am not showing any drop frames for this stream yet. Now, that doesn't mean that YouTube's not messing up somehow. I can tell you that for sure, right? But anyway, so normally you'll have 3 dice. You'll have different events that give you more dice. The maximum number of dice you're ever going to roll are going to be 5. So in a situation like this, the Axis player is trying to get this event here. So both players would reveal their conflict cards, whatever events that they assign to this, which, like I said, you're not going to see a lot of chances to change this. It's usually pretty straight up where it's the die rolls. So white is allies. So we got the allies roll that. The Axis roll, we'll say it's that. So we've got the colonel, so that's 9, 18. is the total here. We've got the 11, and you can re-roll one Axis die after resolving all the events. Well, here we already see that it's a 19, but we could re-roll it. There you go. Now it's a 25. So the Axis would win. This event now would go into the available events for the Axis. Now, because I was successful doing that, I would have a bonus action available to me. Now, these cards would be discarded into their respective discard piles. So one for the Allies, one for the Axis. You would automatically be sitting there, and you're always going to make sure that you've got the right number of cards in your hand. So you're going to take another card for the Axis and another card excuse me, for the Allies, and add them to your hand. So because the event was successful, then I would sit there and I'd say, okay, so I have the opportunity to have a bonus action. So it's going to tell you right here, what can you do as a bonus action? It's going to show you, you can reorganize, you can fortify, you can reinforce, you can use it, do another event action, or you can do an attack action. So I'm going to say, okay, well, I got my event. It's early in the game. I want to attack someplace. I want to get something here. I want to start expanding my influence. So the Axis player decides, I'm going to attack Yugoslavia. So in a land combat, what you're looking at here is you're going to count up the adjacent areas under your control. Now, you can't just attack any place you want. You have to control an area adjacent to it. Or be able to, for an example here, if I had the Black Sea, I could actually go from Romania to the Caucasus and attack there if I wanted to, because this gives me the ability for an amphibious operation. But we're not doing that. We're just saying, okay, we're going to attack Yugoslavia here. So we've got the various different Axis-controlled areas, and all that's allied connecting to Yugoslavia is going to be Greece. So because I have more, that's going to give me an extra die. So this is going to be a land combat. We would take a look and say, what do we got here? I would assign General Rommel to the combat. I also have Stukas too. So you've got, let's say we're going to play these two here. So we've got General Rommel and the Stukas. And General Rommel just makes the allied player, if I choose to, re-roll a die. And the Stukas actually make me re-roll an allied die as well. So we've got those two there. Let's see, what would the Allies have that they may want to use? Fleet carrier is not going to help. Convoy's not going to help. And Patton doesn't help because that's when attacking, not when defending. So we've got these two here. And we've got the German player says, okay, I really want to get Yugoslavia there, so I'm going to play the Italian Lieutenant General as a conflict card. The Allied player might be sitting there going, well, I mean, yeah, Yugoslavia is important, but I don't know. I'll give it a run with the Major. So, of course, you're not discussing it. You're just plopping these cards down, face down, for your opponent. So, we have the Allies reveal the Major. The Axis reveal the Lieutenant General. Now we're going to roll our dice. So, we've got... Whoops. Got a 4, 3, and a 1. So, we've got 16 here for the Allies. We've got 21, 22 for the Axis. there's no reason for me to make the Allies re-roll any dice, because straight up, the Axis have defeated the Allies here. So, I do not have to assign these event cards. These event cards will still stay available to me to use later on. If for some reason I did decide to do that, what I would end up doing is, okay, if I had General Rommel, yeah, let's re-roll that. Well, that wouldn't have worked out. That makes it closer. Once I would use that, if I won, I am going to flip that over. So that is not going to be available to me for the rest of my turn. Say I didn't use the Stukas, we bring these back. Now, for an example, let's say I did utilize these, but I lost. Let's say I lost. Let's say that we got just smoked here, right? So we got 24. Let's change this like that, right? So let's say, oh man, what a horrendous roll for the Axis. Well, now see they have these win-lose, the WL, that little circle up there. That WL indicates that it's a win or lose. So if I won and used them, I would end up just flipping them over. I can't use them for the rest of the turn. If I had lost, then these actually get removed and they go back into the Axis events. So I would have to purchase them again, not purchase them, but earn them again to be able to use it. So for an example, let's just say we'll go with the original rolls that I had. It was something like that. So what would happen here is Germany would have succeeded and they would have taken over Yugoslavia. They would control Yugoslavia. If I wanted to, I could say, hey, I want a blitzkrieg, remove that, drop my hand size, and try to go into Greece. So there's like a push your luck element as far as that goes. So the vast majority of the time, what you are doing is you are playing your conflict cards in order to either gain events or to attack areas and to control areas. And there's a lot of back and forth going on in the game itself. Now, the funny thing is, a lot of people will sit there and say, wow, you know, that's pretty simplified. And it is. I mean, it's not an extremely difficult game to wrap your head around if you kind of go online and you watch like a how to play, or if you go to Board Game Geek or GMT and download the designer's kind of sort of like not necessarily a quick start, but kind of an explanation as far as how to play the game. So as I mentioned before, you're going to continue back and forth. Now there's some built-in mechanisms too, as far as the allies and their production, right? So when you start going into these years, these new years, you're going to start seeing that the allies' hand size is going to start jumping up. It's going to start going up. There are quite a lot of allied events that allow you to increase your hand size by 1. And as I mentioned before, the hand size with the conflict cards is sort of along the lines of your resources, your basically your war production. And as the game progresses year by year, the Allies' war production, mainly the United States, continues to grow and grow and grow. So the Allies, or I should say, I should say the Axis, really have an emphasis on trying to take over these areas that show resources for the Allies. Because when a side loses one of these resources, their hand size is going to drop by 1, and it will stay down until they reclaim that resource center. So it is possible during Operation Barbarossa, if you've planned ahead, if you're a German player and you've planned ahead and things break your way, it is possible to go and drive to Moscow and to be able to kind of take the Soviets out pretty early. Doesn't happen too often. As I mentioned before, if the Axis player controls both London and Moscow at any point in time, the Axis win. If you reduce a player to 3 or less for the hand size and you are at a hand size of 12, you will win. There's also, if you reduce your opponent's hand size, regardless of what your hand size is, all the way down to 0, effectively you've crippled their war production. They can't continue, they can't fight on. Then if we get to 1945, we finish up the end of 1945, and Germany still holds on to Berlin as well as 2 of their original production resource locations, then they win. Otherwise, they lose. And that pretty much is how you play Hitler's Reich World War II in Europe. So what do I think of the game itself? All right, so I'm the first one to point out that I don't think Hitler's Reich is going to be for everybody. And there's a few reasons why. So some folks, when they see that they've got event cards, they're going to think, oh yeah, so this is a card-driven game as far as, like, say, Washington's War or Twilight Struggle or the Coin series. It is card-driven to some extent, but not card-driven like that. So there are people who are not going to necessarily dig the fact that you can have events that took place in like 1944 happening early on, or things that happened early in the war that happened later in the war. The game is not necessarily programmed to play out exactly like World War II, which, as an abstract game, why would you want it to play out like that? The events are there to kind of give more flavor, more historical flavor to the title itself. Some people won't like the luck element, right? So you've got the luck of the draw, plus you're rolling a bunch of dice, and it is possible that you just go into just tailspin as far as your die rolling. I mean, it happens to everybody. But I do have to point out that it is not just simply a luck fest. There are people out there when they first start playing, say for an example, Twilight Struggle, right? A lot of times they'll blame, the cards I got in my hand, that's why I lost. That is not usually the case. Usually someone who's really well-versed in Twilight Struggle can actually survive a bad hand of cards, bad turn of cards, bad die rolls, things like that. They can survive that. It's not usually going to be, that's why I lost. I got bad cards. So it's easy to kind of blame some of the luck and randomness in Hitler's Reich for when you lose Hitler's Reich. I have played the game 3 times. I've played it as a 2-player game. I've played it against my nephew twice, and then my nephew's friend who's really into World War II, who kind of watched us play our second game, played it with him. And the games have played pretty tightly. I will be the first to admit that I have not wrapped my head around all the intricacies of this design, because they're there. They are there. It's almost along the lines of, I'm gonna say Twilight Struggle again, whereas because like your conflict cards, you'll have the big high value conflict cards. Well, you're only going to have 2 13s per year at most. So you don't want to blow a really high value card if you don't have to. It's the element of, okay, so what is the reward for this risk? You don't want to you don't want to waste a high value card on something that's not really critical to your game plan. So there's that aspect. There's the aspect of the events too. Sometimes you unleash events at the right time, and it's like, boom, man, that was awesome. Other times you're kind of like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have any events that really help me out. What's going on here? Well, if that's the case, get rid of those events. Go get some events that are going to work and replace the ones that you've got. So I like the aspect of the game where I have not nailed down every wrinkle to the gameplay, and I appreciate that. I like that. Like I said, it's not going to be for everybody, because some people aren't going to like the randomness of the dice. They're not going to like the randomness of the conflict cards. They're not going to like the fact that you have to actually earn the event cards, that you don't just get events outside of the ones that you start off with. So I can see that some like really, really heavy-duty wargamers may not necessarily like the abstractness of this title either. But that said, I really like it. I really think it's a pretty cool game. I'm enjoying discovering different ways, different things about it. I'm always ending up playing the Axis so far. That's not unusual. Over the years, I always seem to end up having to play the Axis, which is like, whatever, that's fine. It's okay. It's like I don't share their philosophies, things like that. But in order to play the game, I'm more than happy to jump in on it. I really like it. Like I said, I thought the board itself is a little bland. It's serviceable. It serves its purpose. I would have liked to have seen just a little bit of pop, a little more pop to it. The card backings, artwork's very cool. I like the artwork. Actual fronts of the cards, they're all right. Conflict cards, I mean, what can you say? The component quality is excellent as far as the card stock and the various different tokens and the board itself, all really nice. So when it all boils down to it on a scale of 1 to 10, and I think as I would play Hitler's Reich a bit more, the score will probably go up a little bit. I give Hitler's Reich an 8 out of 10. As I mentioned, it's not going to be for every wargamer out there. Some people aren't going to like the chaos of the randomness, things like that. But I don't think if you play smart and you don't try to overreach, especially as the Axis, you don't try to overreach, you can kind of mitigate some of that luck. You can kind of turn that bad luck into neutral luck if you run across that. All right, so that is it for today's show and my review of Hitler's Reich. As I mentioned on tomorrow's show, I'm going to be taking a first look at Kids on Bikes from Renegade Games Studios and Hunters Entertainment. And if you are a fan of games that are like nostalgic 80s, kind of like oddball, like The Goonies or E.T. or Stranger Things, and you dig, say, like Tales from the Loop, probably don't want to see what we've got in store for us with Kids on Bikes. All right, so that is it for today's show. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. When you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to go visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. Come on, you know the drill by now. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. I will be back tomorrow. So until then, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. And as always, thanks for watching. Thanks again for watching The Daily Dope, presented by The Gaming Gang. If you like this episode, be sure to give it a quick thumbs up. And if you dig the channel, please subscribe. If you'd like to check out our previous episode, click right here. And if you want to check out a somewhat randomly selected episode, give a click right down here. It'll be like opening a box of Cracker Jacks. You just don't know what you'll get. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'm Jeff McAleer.